So we are going to discuss the Bhagavad Gita right from the beginning, based on certain commentaries of Ramanujacharya primarily, and also Sripad Yamunacharya. So it is so amazing, this particular scripture Gita, that when you go through these different commentaries, you understand how the same text is is described, is explained in so many wonderful ways by all these personalities. Uh, in fact, Ramanujacharya's commentary is also special to followers of Srila Prabhupada, because Prabhupada himself had once said, when there was some scholar who told Prabhupada that your Bhagavad Gita purports sound very similar to Ramanujacharya. So Prabhupada took that as a credit instead of seeing that as an acquisition. Like in the Western world, they talk about plagiarism. You take from someone and then explain. So so that academic scholar perhaps had such a intention, but Prabhupada took it as a credit, saying that yes, we have been following in the footsteps of the Acharyas. So Prabhupada was, uh, he accepted that particular, what was to be a criticism, as a credit to himself. So as I was hearing this particular series on Bhagavad Gita based on Ramanujacharya's commentary, I realized that so many points that we were reading in Srila Prabhupada's purport, they have actually indeed been described by Ramanujacharya. It's also likely that several acharyas described some points the same way. But obviously, there are some other points also which Ramanujacharya speaks of, because obviously, when we read one particular commentary, like the followers of ISKCON, we read the commentary of Srila Prabhupada. So we may not find, it's impossible to find the commentaries of all acharyas embedded in that. It's just impossible, right? Because the subject matter is so large, and so many acharyas have given so many commentaries to each text. You couldn't possibly include everything in the same set of purports. Which is also very interesting why we know the story of 1977, when Prabhupada was asked, after completing Srimad Bhagavatam, which book would you like to do? Prabhupada actually said, I would like to do the Bhagavad Gita again. So when he was asked, but Bhagavad Gita you have already done. So Prabhupada remarked that there are so many Bhagavad Gitas, indicating that it's not the end of the day, where just one commentary is given and then we stop with that, because you could explain that again and again in many ways. In several ways, this discussion is also pertinent in a modern sense, where we hear of how, like in Gujarat or in some places, the government is said to have decided to have Bhagavad Gita curriculum in their schools from 5th to 12th standard. So sometimes devotees get quite excited when we hear this. We feel that hey, it's so great. But at the same time, it's important to understand that how would this teaching actually happen? Because it is so important that the teacher who is there should have read and understood different perspectives and really give a very holistic perspective to the children. Because you cannot give it like so one-sided also. Okay, so the devil is in the details of that implementation. How would they teach Bhagavad Gita? Right. So that is why we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam also, that one of the qualifications of Sutta Goswami, which is given in the first canto, is that he had read all the Vedic literature, scriptures, Puranas, and so many studies he had done before speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. When we hear this, we perhaps skip over these verses. It is there in, I think, first canto, chapter 3 or 4. 4 perhaps, when they are talking about the qualifications of the speaker, where they say, where this point is being made, that he has gone through so many scriptures and he has heard from so many sources, etc. We fail to understand that this is indeed a qualification for a speaker in the Vedic tradition to have heard several perspectives, to be able to integrate and give holistic views. Okay, so so these are some thoughts before I jump into chapter 1. Also, another final point to make here is these commentaries are so devotional and so sweet. And you will see, especially in the first chapter, not today, but later, that so much of Ramayana is quoted in connection to Bhagavad Gita, which makes it very interesting. We generally don't think there are so many verses in the Gita for which Ramanacharya will quote from some Ramayana and make that connection. Okay, so it is devotionally very sweet, nectarian, and so on. Right, so let's jump into it right away. So I'm just having three sources that I'm using currently on the screen. One is that translation of Prabhupada's Gita. One is the verses of the Bhagavad Gita, because we will be seeing the verses a lot. We'll be going into certain verses as well, because there are several commentaries that talk from specific verse perspective. And also, this is one particular text which is a commentary of Yamunacharya. It's in Sanskrit, but it's very simple and very sweet. It is Yamunacharya's, it's called Gita Sangraham, where Yamunacharya is speaking. He has condensed the entire Bhagavad Gita 700 verses into 32 verses. So we will be going through some of these verses also. So these are three sources I have. One is Prabhupada's translation, which we will see sometime. We will also look at the text of the Gita itself, and we will also look at Yamunacharya's commentary on Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so we'll start with the Yamunacharya's commentary, because so Yamunacharya, what he has done, he has given these 32 verses as Gita Sangraham, which is basically in Sanskrit what it means is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And in that, in the first verse itself, Yamunacharya is said to have condensed the entire Bhagavad Gita in one verse as to what Krishna wants to say. And in the subsequent second, third, fourth verse, he condenses six chapters. The first six, the second six, and the third six. So he's giving like a summary of 6 chapters in one verse. So like that, he has written 3 verses from 2 to 4. And then onwards, there is a summary per chapter. Okay, so we are going to look at only 5 verses from this today. And obviously, very quickly, we are going to go into the Bhagavad Gita itself. Okay, so we will begin with the first one. So this is Yamunacharya's writing, where he's summarizing the Gita. So let's see what he's saying here. So I'm reading the Sanskrit, and also we will be explaining. So he says, Swadharma Jnana Vairagya Sadhya Bhakteka Gocharaha Narayana Param Brahma Gita Shastre Samiritaha. So Yamunacharya in this particular verse is saying Swadharma Jnana Vairagya. So it's very interesting. He begins it with Swadharma. So he says Swadharma Jnana Vairagya Sadhya, using these as tools, Bhakti Eka Gocharaha. Krishna is talking about Bhakti Yoga. And what is the purpose of the Bhakti Yoga? Narayana Param Brahma. To achieve the Param Brahma, the lotus feet of Lord Narayana, Gita Shastra Samiritaha. So the Gita Shastra is meant to help you achieve the Supreme Brahman, Lord Narayana, who is achieved through Bhakti Yoga. And this Bhakti Yoga itself is approached by Swadharma, Jnana, and Vairagya. Okay, so he's using these three. So at the face of it, somebody may say, how come Bhakti Yoga is defined as something that is achieved through Swadharma, Jnana, Vairagya? Because generally we understand that Bhakti Yoga is independent of Jnana, Vairagya, and everything. Certainly that is correct. Bhakti Yoga is not dependent on anything. We have so many Shastric references for that. But the point Srila Yamunacharya is making here, which we should pay attention to, is that the Bhakti Yoga described in the Bhagavad Gita sits on top of Swadharma Jnana Vairagya. That means Krishna is not expecting anywhere in the Bhagavad Gita that you do Bhakti Yoga without having gone through the Swadharma. Okay, so, because the Swadharma and Jnana, which is the subject of the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is building Bhakti Yoga on top of that, not instead of that, or not cancelling that. Okay, so the point here is, yes, it is understandable, and even in the even before Yamunacharya, they were, for example, the Alvars, many of them who were engrossed in pure love of God, perhaps who did not do any literal swadharma or jnana, etc., because they were pure devotees right from the word go. But the point is, that may be the case, but the Bhagavad Gita's Bhakti Yoga, which is there, it is going step by step. So this is something we need to appreciate, as we have discussed even many times before, that the Bhagavad Gita's description of Bhakti Yoga is on top of Sadharma Jnana. It is not cancelling it. Okay. So that means Krishna has used Swadharma Jnana. Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to be situated in Swadharma Jnana, which is basically what we always call as Nishkama Karma Yoga. We call as Buddhi Yoga also, which is nothing but Swadharma Jnana and Bhakti on top of it. Okay. So that means using these as tools, one reaches or approaches Bhakti. I mean, one doesn't approach Bhakti by cancelling one's Swadharma and Jnana, because Arjuna wanted to cancel or run away from his Swadharma, which is not Krishna, which is not what Krishna wanted. Right. So if Arjuna would have told him that I want to do Bhakti Yoga by not doing my Swadharma, that was certainly not acceptable to Krishna. So that is why Swadharma, Jnana, Vairagya, and Vairagya is also there. Vairagya, because when you are doing your Swadharma, you have a detached spirit, right? So like we all have always spoken so many times about Nishkama Karma. That means you are situated in your activities and acquiring knowledge, but at the same time maintaining a spirit of detachment. Using these as tools, you approach Bhakti Yoga in order to obtain the lotus feet of Lord Narayana, and this is the purpose of Gita. So in this way, Yamunacharya summarizes the entire Gita's purpose in one line by not cancelling anything, because he's very conscious that the Gita as a book has the psychology, right? Gita as the book has the psychology of never cancelling Swadharma right till the end. So that's why he's beginning his commentary on it with that particular word. Okay, so this is the first verse where he's summarizing the entire 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Then he has written 3 verses which talk about the first 6, the middle 6, and the last 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. Again, very beautifully summarized. We'll go through this as well. ज्ञान कर्मात्मिके निष्ठे योग लक्ष्ये सुसंस्कृते आत्मानुभूति सिद्ध्यर्थे पूर्व षट्केन चोदिते. Purva Shatka. Shatka means 6. We all know in Sanskrit, right? Shatha means 6. So Purva Shatkena means the first 6. So what is the first 6? Chodite. Chodite means to instruct. So Krishna is instructing. Krishna is giving a diction. He's telling Arjuna that this must be done, right? It is a vidhi. So Krishna is instructing Arjuna. And what is he instructing? Chodite means this is in dual case in Sanskrit. Dual means two, we know, right? Singular, dual, and bahuvachan. Ekavachan, dvivachan, and bahuvachan. So dvivachan means jnana karmatmike. That means the first 6 chapters are about what? Jnana yoga and karma yoga. That is the basic content of the first 6 chapters. So that is why he's saying chodite. The dual case is being used because Krishna is primarily speaking about jnana and karma yoga. Yoga lakshe, that means, now here the word yoga is not, yoga, we all know means has one way you look at yoga is, okay, jnana yoga, karma yoga. But here when he's saying yoga, he's talking about it as a upaya. That means jnana and karma yoga, jnana and karma are done with yoga as the goal, right? So that means you are integrating, you're connecting both lakshya. Lakshya means goal. So that means you're reaching yoga as the goal. So Samskrite, this word is also very beautiful. Samskrite means purification. Just like, in an altar, whenever a pujari offers anything, like you go to Radha Vrindavan altar and give 1 dozen banana or something to be offered to the Lord, then the pujari, what he does, he will do prokshan on it, right? He does some prokshana. He does some achamana, does prokshana. He uses some mantras. He does some mudras on top of the bhoga. And then he puts tulasi and then he offers it. So this is called Samskrite. Samskrite in this context means to do some purification. Okay. So that means this jnana and karma are supposed to be purified. So how are they purified? They are purified by doing them for the pleasure of Krishna. So that means they are with Narayana or Krishna is the goal. With that consciousness that it is not for me, but it is for the Lord that I am doing this. So that consciousness becomes the samskriti, that purification. Okay. And when you purify your jnana and karma like that, then what happens? You go towards the laksha of yoga. That means you approach yoga. And what is the benefit of approaching yoga? Atmanubhuti siddhyarte. Atmanubhuti siddhyarte means to understand the self. Okay, so please note the first 6 chapters are primarily about jnana and karma, right? Jnana and karma yoga. So there the goal is to understand the self. Like, in the second chapter, Krishna is talking about Sithadhir Muni from 2.54 to 2.72. And there's so many places in the first 6 chapters. The goal is to understand the self. Atmanubhuti siddhyarte. In order to understand the happiness of the Atma, that is the goal of the first 6 chapters. So this whole verse summarizes the first 6, the Purva Shatka. So I'll just repeat the whole thing again. He's saying that the first 6 chapters are nothing but summarizing jnana and karma with the goal as yoga and being purified. And here purification means with the concept of offering that to the Supreme Lord Narayana and for the purpose of understanding the Jivatma. Right. So that is the goal of the first 6. Then the middle 6 is spoken in verse number 3. Madhyame Bhagavat Tattva ya Satmatma Vapti Siddhaye Jnana Karma Binirvrityo Bhakti Yoga Prakirtitaha. Madhye means the middle 6 chapter. What is the purpose here? Bhakti Yoga Prakirtitaha. That means Krishna is talking about Bhakti Yoga. And how is he talking about Bhakti Yoga? Bhagavat Tattva. Bhagavat Tattva means we all know, right? The nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yatatmyam. Yatatmyam, that word is used after Bhagavat Tattva. Yatatmyam is to understand the true nature of the Supreme Lord. What is his nature? Right? So his heart, that comes out, right? Like in the 9th chapter. So many verses where he, for example, saying that understand that my devotee never perishes and all that. So you understand the yatatmyam. You understand the confidential nature of the Supreme Lord. Avapti siddhaye. Avapti siddhaye means siddhi means to reach, and avapti means to have that anubhava, to have that experience. Okay, so that means the purpose of the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-Gita is to understand Bhagavad Tattva, to understand the true nature of the Lord, and to actually experience Him. Okay, so we all know, like in the 10th chapter, 11th chapter, right? Krishna is talking about how He is to be seen everywhere in the world and everything is to be seen in Him and so on. These are the ways in which one actually has that anubhava, avapti. Avapti means that anubhava of Krishna. Okay, and how is this anubhava to be achieved? How is this bhakti yoga to be practiced? He's again repeating what he spoke in the first chapter. Jnana karma binirvritti. That means by not forsaking the karma yoga spoken earlier. Okay, that means that karma yoga and jnana yoga, which was spoken in the first 6 chapters, Yamunacharya is reminding us that don't think that that is to be now put aside. That is also there only, because the whole idea is that any grantha, there is a continuation. Okay, this is a very important concept. That means in any grantha in the Vedic literature, there is a logic in it. It cannot happen that Krishna will speak something in 6 chapters and the next 6 chapters he will speak something which has no connection to the first 6 chapters. So if somebody were to think that the Bhakti Yoga spoken in the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita has absolutely nothing to do with the first 6 chapters of Bhakti Yoga, of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, then what happens is that whole discussion of the first 6 chapters of Karma and Jnana Yoga become meaningless, right? Because if Bhakti Yoga is the topmost and that Bhakti Yoga has nothing to do with that Karma Yoga of first 6 chapters, then that first 6 becomes totally irrelevant. It is just,
मेरा काढ़ा जरा छान के
1 second.
एक गिलास में डाल के देखो.
Sorry, I think I had to move something. Yeah. So So the point here which is being made is that the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita cannot be seen in isolation of the first 6 chapters. So that is why Yamunacharya is saying Jnana Karma Binirvrityo. That means this Bhakti Yoga of Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Yeah, somebody else may talk about Bhakti Yoga, which is having nothing to do with Swadharma, etc. But Krishna's description of Bhakti Yoga is connected to that first 6, because Krishna is not expecting Arjuna to do Bhakti Yoga without those 6, and neither is expecting his readers to do that. Okay, so that is the point being made here. Jnana Karma Binirvrityo Bhakti Yoga Prakirtitah. Krishna is describing Bhakti Yoga in the middle 6 chapters. Then the final verse. Pradhana Purusha Vyakta Sarveshwara Vivechanam Karmadir Bhakti Rityadi Purva Sheshonti Moditaha. Purva Shesha means, in one sense, basically, if you see the first 12 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, whatever Krishna has to say, he has said. Right. In the first 6 chapters, he has spoken about Karma and Jnana Yoga, and in the middle 6 chapters, he has spoken about Bhakti Yoga. So somebody may say the last 6 chapters, what is he speaking? If everything is, the main thing is Bhakti Yoga. If you call Bhakti Yoga as the highest also, which is there, right? If that's like the highest achievement, that is the goal of the Bhagavad Gita, then in some sense that is already complete with the 12th chapter. Then why 13 to 18? Okay, so Yamunacharya says Purva Sheshonti. So whatever is Shesha, whatever is left over in the first 12 chapters, that is being spoken in the last 6 chapters. Purva Shesha. And what is that Purva Shesha? So Purva Shesha, there are 2 types of Purva Shesha. One is Tattva and one is Hita. Okay, so these 2 things are there. If you remember, even in our Ramayana discussion, we were focusing on this Tattva and Hita as in many ways the focus of the Shastra. In some sense, Tattva is like our Sambandha and Hita is like the Abhideya or Prayojana. So Tattva means like Jivatma, who is Paramatma, what is Prakriti. This is all Tattva. Hita means the process. Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, these are all processes. Okay, so there are 2 things in the Bhagavad Gita. In all the first 12 chapters, there is Tattva and there is Hita. The understanding of nature, Prakriti, Ishvara, Jiva, etc. And the understanding of the yoga system, okay, which is Hita, which is the benefit of the Bhagavad Gita. So in the last 6 chapters, it is divided into first 3 and last 3. That means 13 to 15 as one group and 16 to 18 as another group. And in 13 to 15, what is happening? Pradhana Purusha Vyakta Sarveshwara Vivechanam. That means in 13 to 15 chapter, Krishna is speaking about whatever is left out of Tattva. Okay, so what is that? Like Pradhana. Pradhana means we know, right? Like from Pradhana, like we say Mula Prakriti, na? We say that Pradhana is the state before Mahat Tattva. So Pradhana, Purusha in this context is actually the Atma. And then Vyakta means that means Vyakta is actually connected to Pradhana. That means the manifest world. The manifest world is called as Vyakta. Okay, so there is Pradhana or inert material nature. Vyakta means the manifestations of it. Purusha means the supreme, the individual Atma. Then Sarveshwara is the supreme Lord. Okay, so these are all Tattva. So these are spoken between chapter 13 to 15. Right? We all know the modes of material nature. About the 13th chapter is nature, enjoyer, consciousness. 14th chapter is modes of material nature. 15th chapter is the yoga of the supreme person. So if you see all these 3 chapters, they're talking about these contents only. Pradhana Purusha Vyakta Sarveshwara Vivechanam. That means whatever is left out of Tattva is spoken in the 13th to 15th chapter. And in the final 3 chapters, what is spoken? Karmadhir Bhakti Rityadihi. So that means from Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, whatever was left, jo bhi bacha gucha tha, right? So if you see the last chapters of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is again going back to the yoga system. Krishna is talking about Bhakti Yoga, he's talking about Jnana Yoga. So Karmadhir Bhakti Rityadihi, about the yoga system, that is the Hita part. Purva Sheshonti Moditaha. All that is covered in the last 6 chapters. So it's a beautiful, if you just meditate on these verses of Gita's Sangraham, you will basically see that Yamunacharya has so wonderfully captured the whole essence of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, in the first verse, the full Bhagavad Gita, second verse, the first six, third verse, the middle six, fourth verse, the last six. And then from fifth verse onwards, he talks about the first chapter. So today we are going to the first chapter. So we'll read the fifth verse and then directly jump into the first chapter as well. So let's see what he says in the fifth verse. Asthana sneha karunya dharma dharma diyakulam partha prapanna muddishya shastravataranam kritam. Okay. Amazing. Huh? So he's saying asthana sneha. Asthana means जिस स्थान पे नहीं होना चाहिए. Asthana sneha. Sneha means like love, compassion. Like sneha we say in Sanskrit. Sneha means affection. There are so many synonyms for it. Asthana sneha. That means in a place where affection is not supposed to be there, affection was shown. By whom? By Arjuna. Asthana sneha. जहाँ पर affection नहीं होना चाहिए, वहाँ पर प्रेम दिखाया अर्जुन ने. Asthana sneha karunya. Similarly, not only Arjuna showed sneha where it was not to be shown, he also showed compassion where compassion was not to be shown. So that asthana you can apply to sneha also and karunya also. Right? So asthana, sneha and karunya. So where compassion and love must not be shown, he showed it. And because of that, what happened? Dharma dharma diyakulam. He considered dharma to be adharma. What is the dharma he considered to be adharma? The dharma of a kshatriya, which is to fight. He considered that to be adharma. Dharma dharma diyakulam. He thought like that. Who thought like that? Partha. Who was Partha? The son of Pritha. Son of Pritha. Why Partha is used? Because by using the word Partha, Yamunacharya is indicating that Arjuna was a relative of Krishna. Correct? So Partha means the aunt of Krishna, the Bua, Arjuna's, Krishna's aunt is invoked, paternal aunt, Bua. So Partha, Prapannam Uddishya, but though he's a relative of Krishna, what did he do? Prapannam. He surrendered. Right? He fell at the feet of Krishna. Uddishya, and in order to deliver him Shastra, this Shastra was spoken. Saranam Kritam. So basically, this is like the first chapter, what is happening. Okay, so now interestingly, in this verse, Yamunacharya is not saying chapter 1. He's only saying Shastra Avataranam Kritam. The reason for that is said is that in every scripture there is something called as Upodgatam. Upodgatam in Sanskrit means the prelude to it. So in any dialogue in the scripture, before the actual scripture starts, there is some background to it. Like we see Vishnu Sahasranama. Correct. So Vishnu Sahasranama starts with, for example, Bhishma saying, Om Vishwam Vishnu Rashatkaro Bhuta Bhavya Bhavat Prabhu. He is speaking about the 1,000 names of Vishnu. But before that, there were some questions raised by Yudhishthira, right? So Bhishma, where he's asking, Kimekam Devatam Loke, Kimbapekam Parayadam. So he's asking several questions. So that is the Upodgatam of the Vishnu Sahasranama. So for every scripture, there is an Upodgatam. So the Upodgatam of the Bhagavad-Gita is 1.1 to 2.10. Okay, so it's not just the first chapter, but even in the second chapter till the 10th verse, Krishna is not really speaking. Right? Krishna starts his instruction literally in 2.11, 2.12 only, where he starts speaking Asocha, Nanvasocha, Swam and all that. So till then, it is all just Upodgatam. It is like a prelude to the text, the background of the text. And what is that background? That we just read now. Asthana Sneha, where love and compassion should not be shown. This Arjuna showed love and compassion, because of which he ended up considering dharma to be adharma. And ultimately, this Partha, he surrendered unto the lotus feet of Krishna. And thus this Shastra was spoken. Okay, so this is how, so this is like, what we have done till now is we have just seen the summary of the Bhagavad Gita. And we have also seen the summary of the first chapter and the first 10 verses of the second chapter. Okay, so this is by Yamunacharya, what I just read. Now we are going into the commentary of Sripad Ramanujacharya, which is like verse by verse. So we'll be reading verse by verse. And as I already said earlier, by and large, the points that are made by Srila Prabhupada, I may just touch it, because I presume that everybody here has read, we have done Bhakti Shastri and all that. So we know by and large what Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, though I'll make a mention of that at times. But essentially, I'll be talking about some points made by Ramanujacharya, which perhaps we may have not come across before. Okay. So we start. Dhritarashtra vacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yustavaha mamaka pandavasteva kima kuruvata sanjaya. So one interesting thing about Sanskrit when I was going through this particular commentary is that there are so many ways Sanskrit words can be combined. And because they can be combined in so many ways, so many meanings also come out of it. And this is really something amazing about Sanskrit language. And this is precisely the reason why Sanskrit as a language cannot really be translated into any language. As in, every Acharya has tried to translate it to some language. But the point is, when you translate to some other language, then there becomes a fixed meaning, only one meaning to it. Okay, but in the original Sanskrit verse only, if you play with those words, you will see that there are so many meanings in it. Okay, so the point is, whenever we make it into English or Tamil, Hindi, any other language, we may just stick with just one meaning because that language has that restriction where it cannot embody in the same set of words multiple contexts and meanings. So this is something amazing about Sanskrit, which is again why it is so important to read the text. Okay. So Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta Yustavaha, Mamaka Pandavascheva, Kima Kuruvata Sanjaya. So this is the first opening verse spoken by Dhritarashtra. Now in this Dharma Kshetra, now see this Dharma Kshetra itself, Ramayana says that there are two meanings to it. So one Dharma Kshetra means for Kshatriyas, Dharma is to fight. Okay, and hence Kurukshetra becomes Dharma Kshetra. Okay, so that means, so Kurukshetra is Dharma Kshetra, of course, we also know because it's a holy place, Parshuram did Yajna, so all that we already know. But the point he's making here is the Kurukshetra is being called as a Dharma Kshetra because all Kshatriyas have assembled there. And Kshatriyas have assembled to do their Dharma. And hence it becomes Dharma Kshetra. So just like a Yajna is a Dharma for a Brahmana, Yuddha is the Dharma of a Kshatriya. So it becomes Dharma Kshetra. Another interesting way in which he splits the words is Dharma Kshaya Trayate. So Dharma means we all know Dharma is Dharma. Kshaya means to reduce. So that means you can split that word in the middle also. So Kshaya means to reduce and Tra means to save. So please try to understand here. Kshaya, Kshayate. Kshaya means to reduce and Tra means to save. Like Trayate we say, right? Trayate means to save. So if you break it like that, the meaning you get from Dharma Kshetra is it saves you from the reduction of Dharma. That means for a Kshatriya to actually fight in such a place like Kurukshetra saves him from reducing his Dharma. Okay, so because if a Kshatriya doesn't actually go out and do Yuddha at the right time, then his Dharma goes away, right? It's like he loses his Dharma. So the Kurukshetra is such a place that it has the power to save you from falling down from your Dharma. Dharma Kshaya Trayate. Okay, so something amazing if you consider these two meanings, that they're in some ways different. Okay. Another thing which is being said here is in the Puranas, every holy place is glorified. So Ramanujara quotes from some Purana where it is said that in Kashi, if you go to Kashi and die, if somebody goes to Kashi and dies in the ground, you get mukti. Okay, so that means if you just go to Kashi and die in any place in Kashi, on the ground, you get mukti. So that is the power of Kashi. On the other hand, the Purana say if you go to Prayag and you die either in the water or on the earth, you get mukti. So that is so Prayag is said to be one step higher. You can die in the water also. Like we know that like Vishnujan Swami, he passed away by drowning in Prayag, right? And Prabhupada remarked that he goes back, he gets mukti. So that Prayag has that power. Of course, we don't want anybody to commit suicide, but I'm just making the point that accidentally or somehow, if somebody passes away in the water in Prayag, where the Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati come together, one gets mukti. But Kurukshetra, the Puranas say that even in the air, if you die, you get mukti. So it's not just in Kurukshetra, it is not just the water or the ground, but even in air. Because the idea is that Kurukshetra was always a Yuddha Bhumi. And because for Kshatriyas in the Yuddha, sometimes they may die in the air, right? Somebody is jumping, right? Like in the Mahabharata also we read somebody is sitting on the horse or the elephant back and he's jumping in the air, and that time someone else uh, draw sends an arrow to pierce that person's chest. So whether you die in the earth, water, or air, you get mukti. So that is the power of Kurukshetra as per the Puranas. So that is how Kurukshetra is described. Samaveta Yutsava. Yutsava means we know those aspiring to fight. Okay, so this point is being made. And Mamaka Pandavas Seva. So Ramanacharya makes this point in great detail, which our Prabhupada makes in his purport, that Dhritarashtra makes a distinction between his sons and the sons of Pandu, right? So which was not expected from him. As an elder in the family, he shouldn't have done that, but he anyway does that. Now this word, Kim Akurvata Sanjaya. So this is very interesting. Akurvata. Okay, Akurvata. So this Akurvata is a verb actually. Kurvata. So in Sanskrit, verbs can be used in two ways. I'll come back to this word, but verbs itself can be used in two ways. When you use the verb for one's own benefit, it is called Atmane Padam. And when you use the verb for another's benefit, it is called as Parasmai Padam. Okay, so it's a very simple understanding. Atmane Padam and Parasmai Padam, which means that the verb can be used either to indicate benefit for yourself or someone else. Like for example, Pachati means cooking for others. Pachate means cooking for oneself. Okay, so this Pachati is a verb, right? So if you use it as Pachati, it means Parasmai Padam. That means you're talking in the context of others, cooking for someone else. But Pachate, if somebody says Pachate, Aham Pachate or whatever, then that means it is Atmane Padam. Atmane Padam means for oneself. So this is something amazing about Sanskrit language, that verbs can be used either in one's own context, either in terms of benefit for oneself or benefit of others. The point here is Dhritarashtra is using this particular verb akurvata, which basically means what did they do, something like that, in Atmanepadam. So this verb, it seems, is an Atmanepadam, which basically means Dhritarashtra wants to ask Sanjaya that tell me what did they do from my benefit perspective. Are you getting this point? Because he's not using Parasmepadam. He's not using in terms of benefit of everyone. He is talking about benefit for himself. Okay. So that is what he's indicating. And this has been captured by all the acharyas, which is why they say that Dhritarashtra was very mean in his thought process. And he's basically asking Sanjay, he's hoping that the holy place has some good influence on Yudhishthir and he will just, renounce everything and run away. So that's kind of what he was hoping. Okay. Because as such, if you see, Kim Akurvata Sanjay, it can also mean that even the holy place could have an effect even on the mind of Duryodhan. And maybe Duryodhan could feel that let me give 5 villages to the Pandavas and stop this war. But that's not what Dhritarashtra wanted, because he was using the verb in Atmanepadam. That means for himself, what benefit is there. Another interesting thing here is this particular verse historically in the Mahabharata is spoken by Dhritarashtra to Sanjay after 10 days of war. Okay, so this is something that sometimes we may ignore when we study the Mahabharata. But if you study the Mahabharata, you will see that Sanjay starts live commentary from the 11th day only. Sanjay, actually the story is Sanjay goes to Kurukshetra as per the Mahabharata, and he spends the first 10 days there only in Kurukshetra, where he understands everything by sitting there. And after 10 days, he comes back and then he starts talking to Dhritarashtra what happened in the last 10 days. And then onwards, from the 11th day, there is live commentary. So it is like the first 10 days of the war, Sanjaya is doing like a replay, like a highlights, match highlights, we say, right? Highlights of the first 10 days he is giving. And then from the 11th day only, actually, Sanjaya starts talking in terms of live commentary. So then the question is, when Dhritarashtra is asking, Kima Kurvata Sanjaya, what did they do? What does it mean by what did they do? So it's obvious that if all the Kshatriyas come together to fight, they will fight. It is just like saying that so many people came together and there was food being served. So what did they do? So obviously they sat and ate. What is the question to ask? But the point here is, what he's trying to ask is, before the war started, did they have some discussion? That is what Dhritarashtra seems to ask. Okay. So just like suppose somebody may ask, before all the prasad was there in the prasadam hall, all the devotees had arrived, and what did they do? So certainly, because all the devotees had arrived and there was prasadam in the prasadam hall, they would have sat down to honor prasad. But before prasad, maybe they would have said Mahaprasade Govinde, or maybe they would have chanted some more prayers like Ekadina Shanti Puri or something. So they would have done something like that, right? So that's exactly what he's asking. What did they do? Did they have some discussion? So Dhritarashtra is hoping that there is some discussion from his benefit perspective. Kim Akurvata. That means Dhritarashtra is hoping that there is some discussion where Yudhishthir and the Pandavas start understanding the futility of war, and they themselves stop the war and they run away. This is exactly what he wanted. And that is why he is asking such a question. And from this, we understand the mentality of Dhritarashtra. Okay. Now, moving ahead, we just take a couple of verses and then stop for the day. Sanjay uvacha drishtva tu pandavanikam vyudam duryodhanasnata acharya upasangamya raja vachanam abravit. So Sanjaya uses the word Duryodhan here to indicate that, Are Baba, your son is Duryodhan. He will never improve only in life, and his Durgati is guaranteed. So apparently this Duryodhan has another name also called Suyodhan. So if you see carefully in the Bhagavatam, in some places he is referred to as Suyodhan, right? But here he is referring him as Duryodhan, which basically means that his name is only such that the holy place is not going to have any good effect on your son. Okay. And by looking at the everything, Drishtua tu, the word tu here, apparently in the Sanskrit, it indicates that the fear of Duryodhana. In fact, this is very beautifully captured by Ramanujacharya, where he describes in detail the fear in Duryodhana's mind. We will see that as we go ahead. Okay, so using the word tu, saying that fear feeling. And then Acharya Upasangamya, he goes to Acharya, which is Drona, Raja Vachanam Abravit. Now here Ramanujacharya focuses on these two words, Vachanam and Abravit. Now if you see the translation, Vachanam means words and Abravit means spoke. Somebody may, if you think about it carefully, these two words which are there, Vachanam and Abravit. I mean, why are you using two words here? Why use the word Vachanam? Sanjaya could have just said that Duryodhana went and Abravit, spoke to his Acharya. He could have just said he spoke to Acharya. Why say spoke words to Acharya? Vachanam means words in a sense, and Abravit means spoke. So why is he saying he spoke words? The idea is that whatever he spoke was all meaningless, and hence it is just described as words. And so, like we say, when a foolish man says something, they just say he spoke many words. Spoke many words as in he spoke a lot of stuff, but there was kuch dam nahi tha usme. There was no strength in what he spoke, and that's exactly what is going to happen with Duryodhana. He's going to speak, but it is just some words he's speaking. These words are all indicating his fear, which are all very mundane, and which are in a big sense, it's actually meaningless, right? So that's what it is. So that's how Sanjaya starts. And then look at the next verse. Now this is beautiful. Pashyetam Panduputranam Acharya Mahatim Chamam Yodam Drupada Putrena Tavashishena Dhimata. This verse starts with Pashyetam. So Ramanujacharya says, when do you start a sentence with a verb? He's asking this question. When do you start a sentence with a verb? Think about it carefully. We start a sentence with a verb when we are very fearful. Just like suppose you're driving a car, you say, stop, stop, stop. Stop the car. Because you're fearful. Maybe something is happening. Maybe someone has come in front of the car. So you say, stop, you say. So when do you use the verb first in a sentence? When you're fearful, right? look, dekho, kya hai aage? Some danger is there. You will not say, normally you may say, please look in front of you. There is an auto standing 10 meters at the distance. So we don't start with a verb in such a sentence because there is no fear. But suppose if there is a snake, we say, look, we just see, so we use so Ramanujacharya says that we use verbs in a sentence when we are fearful. And that is exactly what is happening with Duryodhana. So he is very fearful. That is why he's starting the verse with Pashyetam. Pashyetam, see what has happened. Panduputranam Acharyam. Now here again, the Sanskrit is so amazing that what Ramanujacharya does is he says, see, you can split it in two ways. One is, the normal translation that we read. What is the translation? Like in Prabhupada's translation also we read, "Oh my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu." That means he's telling the Acharya, hey Acharya, please see the armies of the Pandu. But another meaning here is Pandu Putranam Acharya. Pandu Putranam Acharya means the Acharya who had Pandu Putra as favorite. So basically, Duryodhana is trying to needle Drona by saying that you always had a soft corner for these Pandu Putra. And you are literally like Pandu Putra Acharya only. Mahatim Chamum. And look at the other side. Mahatim Chamum. Vyudam Drupada Putrena Sava Shishyena Dhimata. So this point we know, right? So Prabhupada also explains about it that Duryodhana is needling our Drona, saying that, see, your intelligent disciple, Drishtadhyumna, has actually set up this whole thing. Okay, so we know that. So why is saying that? We know this because Drupada Putra, the Drishtadhyumna, was born to kill Drona, but he comes asking to Drona to teach him, and Drona teaches him also. So he's basically telling him, see, that fellow is so intelligent and you are so foolish that he was born to kill you. He comes to learn from you and you teach him also. But another thing Ramanujacharya says here, the word Dhimata is applicable to Drona as well in the correct sense. How it is applicable? Because Drona was really intelligent and he did his duty without any attachment to the result. As in, when Drona decided to teach Drishtadhyumna, he knew very well that Drishtadhyumna is destined to kill him. But when Drishtadhyumna approached him for knowledge, understanding that Drishtadhyumna is a right candidate to get knowledge, Drona did not discriminate and say that I will not teach you. So that part is great from Drona's perspective, that he really didn't discriminate between someone who was destined to kill him but still came for knowledge. So in some ways he says that Dhimata, of course, in a very direct way, it applies to the Shishya, but in certain ways it also applies to Drona, because Drona was also intelligent, that he did his duties properly without anything. And from the next verse onwards, obviously I'll stop here. We will be going into detail of the verses. And in the next 10 verses, the fear of Duryodhana is going to come out very strongly. And that is something amazing. If you, the stories of each of these people, there are many stories from the Puranas and several other places. So actually today I didn't do much. I just we just started with Gitartha Sangraham, the compilation of Yamunacharya, seeing the summary of Bhagavad-Gita, summary of the first 6, middle 6, last 6 chapters. And we just saw 3 verses of the first chapter. Next time onwards, I think we will go at a little higher pace. We may cover about maybe, let us say, 10 verses on an average in 1 hour's time that we have. So that we will be able to go at a good speed, and at the same time we'll be able to cover the content to our heart's content. Okay, I'll stop here. Any questions or comments? We'll take. Anybody with any question here? Then raise your hand.
Roji, I had a question. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu, please go ahead.
Okay. My question is, when the original conversation or any situation, circumstance, incident which happened, there was a context to it. So when Krishna and Arjuna are talking, there is a context to it which Arjuna and Krishna know. The original context only Arjuna and Krishna know because they are the originator of that conversation. When the acharyas look at it, depending on the perspective they come up with, or depending upon their mood and devotion, they come up with so many perspectives. But whatever they write is always correct because it stands the test of scriptures and other commentaries and other acharyas. So this wonderful creative freedom, which is very thoroughly supported by devotional principles, my question is like, it's never ending, right? The acharyas who have come till now, if they are within the framework of the essential principles of Sanatana Dharma, it actually means we have not seen so many other perspectives of all the scriptures. I mean, for this case, Bhagavad-Gita also, there could be so many other interpretations which is possible. Is that correct?
See, in some sense, the interpretations or the various commentaries differ in certain details. Each commentary adds certain embellishments to it, or quotes from, let's say, the Ramayana or some other scripture, the relevant verses, and so on. But by and large, the basic message that Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, that can never be disputed, or that could never be covered up too much. Okay, so I'll just give you a simple example. Just like, if you go back to Yamunacharya's first verse, he's talking about, what is he saying? He's saying, Jnana Karmatmike Nishta. He's saying that Krishna is speaking about Bhakti Yoga, which is obtained, which is preceded by Jnana and Karma, right? Now, there could be acharyas, there are many acharyas, not only Srila Prabhupada, but many acharyas who have spoken Bhagavad Gita right from beginning to end only from Bhakti Yoga perspective, correct? We know that. Like if you see, even the Prabhupada, if you see the 6th chapter, if you see many chapters, sometimes devotees ask this question also. In the verse, Krishna is saying something, but in the translation or in the purport, Prabhupada seems to be emphasizing Bhakti Yoga. So why is it that being done? Okay, so that he's doing because certainly Bhakti Yoga is the goal of Bhagavad Gita. As in, Krishna is taking Arjuna to Bhakti Yoga, right? But the Bhakti Yoga is preceded by the other two. So everybody may focus on one, but whatever they are focusing in, that has to be a focus of Krishna. As long as that is the focus of Krishna, it is fine. See, because Krishna, it is so holistic. There are so many, it's like a jewel in which there are so many perspectives which are all simultaneously true, which Krishna and Arjuna obtained. But anybody while explaining, he could just take one part of it and focus on that, which is fine, right? So if some acharya, anybody, he speaks Bhagavad Gita of right from the beginning to the end with the only goal of Bhakti Yoga, that is correct. I mean, there's no way you can say that is incorrect, because indeed, that's what Krishna wants to bring Arjuna to, the level of the most evolved devotee. Okay, so this is why what happens now in comment. Now see, we need to understand. So this is why Sanskrit also plays its role. As long as the verses are in the original Sanskrit, all these multiple meanings stay simultaneously true in those verses. Are you understanding? Like if you like I was saying, right? Dharma kshetre kurukshetre. If you read these words in Sanskrit, all the meanings, the multiple meanings which are all possible, are all simultaneously there in these, right? But when you bring it to other language, English or any other language, then it becomes a little more fixed on specific meaning, correct? So which happens. So that's the greatness of the language also, in which the conversation is happening, because it is, the contexts are unlimited over here. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. So one more point. Yeah. So that's how it is by and large. But I was very kind of surprised and also happy to see that Yamunacharya's commentary, especially, and even to a great extent Ramanujacharya, when he's speaking 2nd chapter. I mean, I'll come to that when I come to 2nd chapter. But even verses like Neha Vikrama Nasosti, Pratyavayona Vidyate, and all these verses he explains it completely from Karma Yoga perspective. And I was very surprised to hear that. Yesterday I was hearing that only. I'm currently hearing the second chapter in this particular series from whichever teacher I'm learning. So, generally we think Neha Bhikama Asosti Pratyavayana Vidyate Swalpam Apyasya Dharmasya Trayate Mahato Bhayat. That 41 verse, or even Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, right? Ekeha Purunandana. We understand these verses only as if they are from Bhakti Yoga perspective, and they are indeed. I mean, nobody can argue that they are not about Bhakti Yoga. But Ramanujacharya, in his commentary, he also says that because second chapter is in the Karma Yoga section, how these verses are applicable to Karma Yoga, he explains. And that was pretty surprising to me. I was kind of happy and at the same time amazed that the same set of verses, you could teach them as applicable to Karma Yoga if you want to look at the context of the second chapter. But if you want to look at the context of the scripture itself, like, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, from whose purport Srila Prabhupada draws that 2.41, he speaks of Vyavasayatmika Buddhi completely in a Bhakti context, right? Where he talks of Vyavasayatmika Buddhi means fixed at the order of the spiritual master. Okay. Now, if you see, Ramanujacharya is not bringing that meaning. So Ramanujacharya says that, okay, it's not that he would not accept that meaning, but his point is that because this is coming in Karma Yoga section, first 6 chapters, we have to see how this verse applies to Karma Yoga. And he explains that verse only from Karma Yoga perspective. Okay, so it doesn't make Ramanujacharya's commentary small because he's talking of Karma Yoga when he's talking Vyavasayatmika Buddhi. Neither it makes Chakravarti Pad or Srila Prabhupada who's talking about those verses from Bhakti perspective only, as if it is not the meaning, because why not? That's the beauty of Krishna's statement. Krishna has just made one statement and it can simultaneously apply everywhere. Okay. Somebody may choose the context of Karma Yoga like Ramanuja and explain that versus Karma Yoga. Another may choose the overall context of Bhakti tradition and explain that versus Bhakti Yoga. So it's all possible. But the beauty is that's why I said, as long as you retain the Sanskrit, all those meanings remain there intact. Okay. Only when you bring it to English or some other language, then you are stuck with just one meaning. But in the Sanskrit, all those meanings simultaneously exist forever. So that's something beautiful about the language, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Actually, I had 2 more follow-up questions. One is then, from a scriptural and commentaries perspective, there could be multiple as it is
Of course,
commentaries.
of course. See, this as it is concept, I mean, we should not look at, see, while simultaneously we are proud, we will continue to distribute Prabhupada's books the way we do and everything. We are proud of his contribution as it is. That as it is never to be seen in that narrow-minded Abrahamic context that yehi hai bas, in that sense, If somebody thinks like that, then that becomes, that can become terrible actually, as in, one may become very narrowed. As it is, why not? Multiple as it is. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling who is that person, Sarvam Bhattacharya, that there are 64 meanings to that Atma Ramascha Muniyovan, and if only one meaning is explained, there can be 64 as it is, na? At least to Atma Ramascha Muniyovan. So how could you say that as it is could apply like that? So that's a very, very dangerous way of saying. And that's why I was saying that in Gujarat or wherever, anybody who teaches Bhagavad-Gita, unless you have that maturity and that holistic idea, you may tend to think that, this is the only as it is. So that's very dangerous.
Yeah. Correct. It makes sense. Really, one last question for now. This beauty of Sanskrit language of the scriptures and its commentaries has a flip side also, that it could be twisted to bring out any agenda driven and a perspective which does not conform to the intent. And the fact that so many commentaries are possible, it will be difficult to defend that this another commentary is not possible only from the perspective of the translation part. Let's not get into commentary, but translation. It may not stand the test of Shastra praman or guru and acharya praman, but just translating it has that flip side, and we have to somehow defend and fight with it. The reason I'm saying this is, I mean, in my college WhatsApp group IIT, so recently they gave a very horrible, can't even repeat that, horrible translation of Ashwamedha Yagya. And the moment I read it, I just could not, because people are not very receptive to have a conversation over there. It was so bad, I could not stand it. I had to leave the group. But I was just thinking, uh, I mean, I could not stand and defend the scriptures. No one was in a mood. No one had a serious intent while they were quoting it. But from their perspective, they find there is so much variety, and the acharyas themselves are not able to conquer what is the exact meaning. Why my meaning should not be considered as another viable option? So that's a risk we run, isn't it?
See, not exactly. I think this happens when the words are seen isolated without the context itself.
Yeah.
So, though there are several meanings to the verses and words that nobody is saying no. Mahaprabhu himself said that every word is Srimad Bhagavatam has unlimited meaning. He didn't even say 64 meanings. He said every verse has unlimited meaning. But each of that unlimited meanings is also defended by the Purva Paksha and everything. So actually, even for this, like this course I was doing, I actually currently here I have just jumped directly into verse by verse. They will take at least in traditional scholarship, when they start teaching a commentary, we had almost 3 classes initially justifying or defending the entire thought process behind giving a particular commentary. So that means you cannot just throw out any meaning you want from a word and twist it. So that, see, we may not be able to defend it because we may not know the language or context, but anyone who actually knows the subject, he will not, such people cannot even stand in front of them. You can't just take a word and give some meaning without, okay, Ashwamedha Yagya, now you have just taken one word like that. Where is that Ashwamedha Yagya description coming? What is the prelude to that? What is after that? The Purva Paksha, the Uttara Paksha, everything. If you take like that and you start arguing with such people, then they will have nothing to show. So these people, what happens is that they simply want to give a bad name to something. So they are just taking any word and giving some random meaning to it. Like we say, Saindava. Saindava is horse, Saindava is salt. You can't take horse as a meaning and do anything. As a standalone word, it may have meaning in Nirukta dictionary, but otherwise, in front of any scholar, such interpretations will not stand. So my point is, though the acharyas are all giving several meanings to these words, but all those meanings can be defended. That is important, and they will have to defend it. Whoever gives those meanings or explanations will have to defend that. Okay, otherwise it is not possible. Otherwise, you cannot just give any meaning and walk off like that. So that's not.
Understood.
Yeah,
and so it's my weakness. I could not defend it, but it doesn't stand the test of acharyas and other scholars.
It doesn't stand the test of not only acharyas, of even basic scholars.
Scholars, it will not stand.
It doesn't stand.
Thank you, bro. Thank you.
Anybody with any other comment?
Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Haribo.
Prabhuji, here can we say like this, that when we are trying to understand the scriptures, we should always be learning them under someone who knows. Otherwise, it's like Shruti, it was written at certain point in the history, but before that it was always learned under someone. If we read on our own, the things may not be properly understandable. So
Actually, scripture
like
is perfectly. Scripture is always learned by hearing only. Very much that point is there. Scripture is learned by hearing. it's hearing is more important. I think there is one purport of the Srila Prabhupada where he talks about this. Hearing is more important than reading. So hearing is any day more important than reading the text oneself. One should read the text, but that is hearing is undoubtedly much more important than that. Okay. In some ways, reading the commentaries of the acharyas is also hearing, because you are hearing from them as such. But anyway, the point is taken. The point is well taken. Hearing is the process. Shravana means hearing actually. It doesn't mean reading. Actually, the modern the idea of reading in certain sense is a little modern also. Because why I'm saying that is traditionally all texts were always heard and understood only. All Shastra were always heard and understood. So hearing is undoubtedly very, very important. Without which it's even difficult to understand so many wonderful explanations also. Because we are all very finite, and without any proper scholarship of the language, it's very difficult to understand that as well. Okay, so if you just take one word Kshetra, there is so much meaning to it. You'll have to go into the Nirukta, understand it, and so on. So without Sanskrit scholarship, even reading Sanskrit text is very, very difficult. So hearing is not only easy, sweet, but also it's very enjoyable. Reading is a follow through. I look at it like that. And after hearing, you read the text to see, what is actually happening here.
And Prabhuji, one more question. This divisions of Bhagavad Gita, like what I was thinking is that's a well-known fact that first 6 chapters are Karma Yoga, middle is Bhakti Yoga, and the last 6 are Jnana Yoga. That is what we hear. So, but here, as what we discussed today, it's combined in the first 6.
Yeah. He's comparing the first, which is correct also. If you see, the first 6 chapters also have Jnana in it. So Jnana, because Krishna is not speaking about, because see, otherwise, the if you see in the 3rd chapter beginning, 5th chapter beginning, Krishna is emphasizing, right? Jnana and karma are not two separate paths. It is one path only. 5th chapter also, if you see the opening verses about that. So Jnana does come. Even in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is transcendental knowledge. It's Jnana only. So Jnana is there even in the 2nd chapter, the last part. Yeta Esha te bhita sankhye buddhi yoge tuvam shrudu. When Krishna says in 2.39, he's speaking about Jnana only after that. Buddhi yoga is considered that only. So basically, Jnana is very much there in the first 6. So that is why, this is again a different way of looking at it, but I think he has justified that very well, Yamunacharya. He's saying that whatever is remaining in the first 12, Krishna is covering in the end, because that's correct, right? About Pradhana, Purusha, Ishvara, all these things are spoken in the 2nd chapter and all, but again he's covering whatever was left out, he's covering in 13 to 15. And similarly, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and all, he has already spoken in the first 12, but he's again repeating it in the 18, whatever was left out. So that is how he's describing it, which is like, okay.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Yeah, so I'll just pause the recording here and then